Welcome to the Murder Mondays podcast. I'm your host and guide through the shadowy corners of unsolved mysteries and long-forgotten tales of true crime. Every week, we'll dig deep into the chilling cold cases, unraveling the stories that time tried to bury. From decades-old investigations to the lingering echoes of justice yet to be served. This is where the past meets the truth. So grab a seat, dim the lights, and join me as we piece together the puzzles of history's most enigmatic crimes. This is Murder Mondays, where the coldest cases are brought back to life. Let's get started. Welcome to Murder Mondays. I'm your host, Lisa Ford. Today, we're unraveling a grim chapter in Miami's history that has faded from public memory but remains deeply chilling to those who know the story. We're diving into a series of brutal murders from the 1960s and 1970s, known as the Flat Tire Murders, or to some, the Miami Strangler. Imagine Miami during those years, a city transforming rapidly, skyscrapers rising, tourists flood into the beaches, and a nightlife pulsing with energy. But beneath this vibrant facade, something dark was festering. Young women were being targeted, their lives violently taken, with their bodies discarded in or near Miami's silent canal. So settle in, and let's journey back to the Miami of old, where sunlit days gave way to the terrors of the night. Our story begins with what seemed like a tragic but isolated incident. It was August 17, 1964, a hot and humid summer day in Miami. Mary E. McGreevy, aged 68 years old, was found dead in her home. Mary lived alone in her modest suburban house for years. A familiar face in her quiet neighborhood, she was known for her bright smile and her love for tending to the flowers in her small front yard. But on this day, Mary's home was silent. Her neighbors grew concerned when she didn't come out for her morning walk or wave to them as she often did from her porch. One neighbor, after a day of no signs of life, decided to check on her. When they knocked and received no answer, the growing feeling of dread took over. The police were called, and when they arrived, they found the front door slightly ajar and a detail that will haunt the neighborhood for years to come. Inside, Mary McGreevy lay in her bed, her body cold, her expression serene, as if she's fallen asleep and simply never woken up. But the truth was far from chilling. She had been smothered to death, her face bearing faint but unmistakable signs of violence. This was Miami in the 1960s, a city that wasn't accustomed to this type of crime. Crime rates were on the rise, but Miami hadn't yet seen the level of brutal violence that would grip it in the coming decades. This was an era when doors were left unlocked and strangers exchanged friendly waves. Mary's death, while tragic, didn't make headlines. In fact, her case was filed as just another statistic, brushed off as a single unfortunate incident. But in hindsight, we know now it was only the beginning. At that time, no one could have imagined that Mary's death marked the start of a chilling spree that would grip Miami in fear, sparking a sense of vulnerability in a community unprepared for the terror that lay ahead. 7 months later, another life was stolen, marking a brutal, chilling turn in what would become a series of brutal murders. It's March 1965, and the night is settling over Miami. The city, alive with tourists and residents alike. It has a certain energy, a sense of opportunity, excitement, and for some, a chance to start over. Among those is Sylvia Valdez, a 38-year-old Cuban exile who fled her home in search of safety and freedom. Sylvia worked late nights at a clothing store on one of Miami's bustling streets, saving money to support herself and hopefully her family someday. Sylvia finishes her shift that evening around 9 p.m., stepping out the brightly lit store into the dim glow of the parking lot. She's tired, but glad to be done for the day, looking forward to the quiet comfort of her small apartment. But as she approaches her car in the all-right parking lot, a sinking feeling overcomes her. Her car has a flat tire. A sigh of frustration escapes her lips as she examines the tire. It's late and she's alone, but there are shadows cast by the flickering streetlights above. A parking lot attendant notices her distress and comes over. Seeing her predicament, he offers to call a nearby garage, and a man named Calvin Jones is dispatched to change the tire. Jones arrives and fixes the tire, and after thanking him, Sylvia gets back into her car. But here's where the details grow hazy. No one saw her leave, and no one heard her say goodbye. In the stillness of the night, Sylvia drives off into the darkness. It would be the last time anyone saw her alive. The following morning, Sylvia's car is discovered in a different part of the lot, parked in an oddly isolated section. Her lifeless body is inside. She had been shot twice, execution style, behind the ear. Her skirt was disturbingly pulled up, and her face partially hidden by a black silk scarf. It was as if someone had arranged her, staged her final moments to tell a story that would never have a resolution. Yet the most perplexing detail, her jewelry, expensive earrings, a delicate gold necklace, and a ring that glinted even in the death's shadow, all left untouched. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. There was something far more sinister at play. The motives behind her killing were opaque, layered in a darkness that left detectives bewildered and horrified. At the time, Sylvia's murder left police with few clues, but it hinted at one chilling possibility: a deliberate and calculated killer who, for some twisted reason, had chosen Sylvia that night. This wasn't just a random act of violence. This was a method, an intentional targeting of a woman alone, vulnerable, and trapped by the seemingly innocent breakdown of her car. It wasn't yet clear that Sylvia's murder would be one in the series, part of a horrific pattern that would grip Miami for years to come. But to those who later reviewed her case, Sylvia's death would mark the start of something terrible, as shadows spreading over the city as the first flat tire murders claimed more lives. As the investigation continued, Miami's police were left with nothing but questions. Why was Sylvia chosen? Why was her body positioned so carefully with her jewelry left untouched? Was the flat tire an intentional setup, a lure to isolate her in that empty lot? Each detail painted a disturbing portrait of a killer who was organized, patient, and now nervingly precise. And although it wouldn't be clear at the time, this was only the beginning. By February of 1966, another woman has fallen victim. This time is Bernardina Gonzalez, a 44-year-old Venezuelan divorcee. Bernardita had moved to Miami in the early 50s, hoping to start fresh and build a better life for herself and her teenage son. Like so many others, she'd been drawn to the promise of Miami's growing opportunities, its sunny climate, and a chance for a stable future. A quiet, hardworking woman, Bernardita spent most of her time between her job and home, providing for her son and staying connected to her Venezuelan roots. In early February, Bernardita took her usual trip to the local beauty parlor, a small luxury she allowed herself to help shake off the stress of a long work week. She was a familiar face at the salon, known for her kind smile and soft-spoken nature. The women at the salon often chatted with her about their families, their struggles, and their dreams of making it in this new, sometimes challenging city. But that day, something felt different. Bernardita seemed distracted, almost on edge, as if something weighed in on her mind. Friends later recalled how she seemed preoccupied, glancing at the door, and then as though expecting someone. Yet, whatever concern lingered on her mind that day, she kept to herself, her demeanor subdued, but polite. That evening, Bernardita didn't return home. Her son, worried and waiting, stayed up late, hoping to hear her keys in the lock. But as dawn approached, he was forced to face the gut-wrenching reality that something was terribly wrong. She wasn't at the beauty parlor, and no friends or relatives had seen her since she left. Days passed, each one stretching the family's hope to its limit. As her son, family, and friends called the police, filed missing persons reports, and circulated her description in hopes that someone, somewhere, had seen her. Weeks turned into months, and still, no word of Bernardita. Her family was left in an agonizing limbo, uncertain if she was out there somewhere, alive, or if the unthinkable had happened. And then 8 weeks later, the waiting came to a horrifying end. A call came in to the Miami Police Department about a body floating in one of Miami's canals, the murky water concealing the face and form of a woman whose life has ended far too soon. When officers pulled the body from the canal, they confirmed what Bernardita's family had feared. She had been brutally murdered. Her skull was fractured, suggesting a violent end, and the condition of her body indicated that she had been left in the water for some time. Her family was devastated. The mystery of her last moments haunted him. Who could have done this? What kind of person would take Bernardita, a gentle woman with no enemies, and leave her lifeless in a canal like a discarded object? It was as if, though Miami itself, with its dark canals and shadow streets, was hiding secrets beneath the surface. The details of her disappearance left police at a loss. She was last seen at a beauty parlor, a public place, yet somehow she had vanished without a trace. Witnesses who seen her that day had nothing concrete to report. No unusual strangers, no suspicious vehicles parked nearby, no out of control, out of the ordinary interactions. Each question left investigators with only fragments of a story that refused to piece together. How did she end up in that canal? Was she taken by force, or had she been lured away, her trusting nature betrayed by someone who knew exactly what they were doing? The fractured skull suggested a personal, brutal assault, yet there was no clue as to who would target her with such a violent intent. Bernardita's case was different from the previous murders of Mary McGreevy and Sylvia Valdez. It carried a new level of brutality, a callous disregard for humanity of a woman who had moved to Miami with nothing but dreams of a safe, secure life for her family. For the police, the sense of dread was growing. With each new victim, the pattern grew darker, the motives more obscure. It was as though Miami had attracted something sinister, a force preying on women who thought they were safe, who thought they could navigate the city's challenge without becoming a statistic. Bernadita's family was left not only with grief of her loss, but also with the unbearable questions that would go unanswered. How long did she suffer? Did she know the killer? And could it have been prevented if someone had known about the hidden dangers lurking in Miami? The case of Bernadita Gonzalez joined those of Mary McGreevy and Sylvia Valdez, each woman's story more haunting and unsettling than the last. But Bernadita's murder stood out to detectives. The brutality of her death, the fractured skull, the abandonment of her body in Miami's silent, murky canal was a disturbing escalation, suggested that whoever was behind these killings was becoming bolder, more violent, and perhaps even desperate. Her family, especially her teenage son, was left to pick up the pieces. Overnight, his world changed. A mother who had been his anchor, his stability in a foreign land, was suddenly gone, taken in a manner that seemed incomprehensible. The community rallied around him, offering support and condolences, but no words could ease the trauma of losing his mother in such a horrific way. In the weeks following Bernadita's discovery, whispers filled Miami's neighborhoods. Fear was spreading. Women were urged to be cautious, to avoid walking alone after dark, and to be wary of strangers. People began locking their doors earlier, casting suspicious glances at unknown faces in their neighborhoods. Even Miami's bustling nightlife began to dim as a sense of foreboding crept over the city. Could it be that a killer was out there preying on unsuspecting women? And if so, who would be next? The police arrived shortly after and were met with a deeply disturbing scene. Inside, Mary's home was in disarray. Furniture was overturned and her belongings were scattered across the floor, as though someone had been searching for or someone had taken pleasure in ransacking her private world. Her clothes were disturbed, and there were clear signs of a struggle, a fight for life that Mary ultimately lost. But what struck detectives the most was the method of her murder. Mary had been strangled, and not in a quick or hurried way. The marks on her neck suggested a slow, deliberate act, one that indicated the killer had taken his time, savoring the horror he inflicted. This wasn't an impulsive crime. It was intimate, calculated, and disturbingly personal. Outside, Mary's roses bloomed as usual, their bright colors a heartbreaking contrast to the tragedy that had unfolded just inside her walls. Her garden was a symbol of her gentle spirit, now served as a stark reminder of her absence. For her neighbors, the news was almost too much to bear. This wasn't supposed to happen here, not in this quiet, close-knit community. Mary was a pillar of peace and kindness, someone who had shared her love of gardening with others, who had made each neighbor feel like family. The thought of such a violence breaking into her life was incomprehensible. As word spread, the community was plunged into shock and fear. The children who had once played in her yard, admiring her roses, now walked by in silence, holding their parents' hands a little tighter. Neighbors who had once left their doors unlocked began bolting them, casting nervous glances at every stranger who passed. Who would do this to someone so beloved, so harmless, and why? The police scurried around Mary's home for clues, determined to uncover something that would make sense of the senseless. Thanks for spending your Monday with me. We've only scratched the surface of the Miami Strangler. Join me for part 2 next Monday, where we follow the investigation as the pattern sharpens and new clues emerge. If this case matters to you, follow, like, and turn on your notifications so you don't miss it. I'm Lisa Ford. This is Murder Mondays. See you next week.